It's movie time, and we're back again with movie time. Hey, everybody, how you doing? Happy Wednesday from all of us here at Movie Time, and we are here today with an amazing guest. But of course, we also have my co-host Arpo. Hey, Arpo, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing fine. Uh, yes, we got WC out of the mug. Oh, well, that's got to go in the dishwasher.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm doing fine, except of course for the biggest hurricane in the history of hurricanes heading straight towards me.
Excellent. It's
Yeah.
gonna be a lot of
Oh, yeah,
fun.
that makes you happy.
Yay! And of course, my co-host Olaf, it's like he may be joining us a little in a little while. In the meantime, though, it's like you guys are in for an amazing treat because today we have Jonathan Bross. Hey, Jonathan, how you doing?
Jerry, I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. This is great. It's like I've tried to stalk you to come here 2 months.
Well, I'm very
Right?
glad to be here, and thank you for having me on the
Yes.
show.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. It's like so. Tell us a little bit about you and how did we get all here?
Well, I'm from Chicago. I was born and raised in Chicago, and my professionally, I started out with Arthur Anderson in their corporate recovery services group, which is the turnaround department, where we would go into distressed companies and try to fix them. And
Hmm.
then I got into the entertainment business because my sister is an actress who went out to LA and made a short film that did very, very well. So she asked me if I would help her start a production company. And I thought, well, how hard could this be if my kid sister can do this? And now I know.
Yes. And from there, it's like you've gone on to do an incredible amount of things. It's like you don't have only one company; you have two.
We do. So from there, my business partner and I started a post production company about 4 years ago here in Chicago,
Hmm.
because we saw a need for post production in Chicago. And this year we started our finance company called Argonaut.
Wow. So it's like that's really branched out big. It's like, and you know what? Chicago is really up and coming in regards to that. So it's like, let's talk a little bit also about your finance company. Let's start with that with Argonaut. So tell us a little bit what Argonaut does in terms of finance.
Sure, we focus on debt financing
Hmm.
because obviously, or as people may or may not know, most films are funded both through equity, through investors who put equity in, but also through debt, where lenders will lend against tax incentives and distribution contracts. So our finance company focuses on the lending part of it. And then we work with the investors who put in the equity. And when a movie is a big hit, those equity investors make a lot of money. And we're very happy to be
Hmm.
part of making a lot of projects. And some of them do very, very well. And it's very satisfying.
We've had a chance to talk also with other people in regards to debt finance. Now, there's the world of those people who feel that there should be more debt finance to more equity because, for the obvious reasons, that in terms of that, it's like it's an easier partnership because with debt finance, it's a certain amount that you're borrowing at and then returning at that certain interest rate. So, what is your thoughts on debt versus equity?
Well, I think they're both tools. Um, for a producer, if a producer can get all equity financing, that gives them the most flexibility and is a terrific way to make a movie. But
Hmm.
uh, a lot of times it's appropriate to bring in a debt financier because then you need, and again, when the movie becomes a great success, the equity financiers get even more of the benefit of being the equity financiers. If there's there's smaller amount of money that is the equity, then when a movie is a success, the return on that smaller amount is much larger.
Okay, so that does make sense because it's like it's like you definitely do want to have a combination of debt and equity. It's like in terms of the way that it works. In terms of debt finance, for a lot of people, it's like when they find that against the tax credits, for example, how is that actually calculated for us for the tax credits? Is it credited by where are you or how much that you qualify for?
Well, the way tax incentives work
Yes.
is that different jurisdictions, Canada, different states like Illinois or New York or Georgia are some examples, but there are 34 or 35 states that have programs in place that when a production is shot in that jurisdiction, the government wants to support it. So they will provide an incentive to essentially provide money back to the production company as a percentage of the amount of money that's spent in that jurisdiction. So if you have a lot of times the amount will be sort of 20 or 25 or 30% of the amount spent. So if you make a movie in Illinois, for example, the government, the state of Illinois will give you a credit for 30% of the amount of money that you spend in the state of Illinois.
Okay.
Which is a pretty good incentive.
It really is.
And then, yeah. So we as a lender will then look at that and say, okay, well, that's the amount of money that the state, we expect the state to give back. And so we will then calculate based on what we perceive the risk to be, the amount of money that we will lend against that. So if there's $1 million to be spent in the state of Illinois, the state will, we expect, generate $300,000 of tax credits. Then we will say, okay, we will lend 80% or 85% or 90% of that $300,000 as a loan to the production.
So does essentially then, when you receive the tax credit, almost take out the percentage of interest on the debt finance, or at least mostly cover it?
Well, that's the way we like to structure it. That
okay,
it's easier for the production if we give them the loan, and then when the credit comes in, we get our return from the credit.
Yeah.
And that way the production doesn't have to worry about the mechanics of taking the credit and monetizing it and getting the money back.
Yeah. Franco Sama just did fairly recently a talk about financing films, and now Grayson will correct me if I'm misquoting him here, but the impression I got was that he was saying, especially for a smaller budget film, maybe the best way to go is to do 50% equity and 50% debt, because that way on the back end, your production company is getting more money back than they would had they gone full equity.
Well, the way I look at it is that if you can shoot in a jurisdiction that has a tax incentive program, why not? It's a program that's there and it's available, and all things being equal, I mean, obviously, if you have a film that's set in, a snow-covered mountain, you probably don't want to shoot that one in Georgia. But all things being equal, if you can shoot in a jurisdiction where there's a tax incentive, it just makes all kinds of sense to do that. Even if you don't borrow, get money to the investors and back to the production.
Well, go on.
Well, I would say what typically happens is the production would like to use the money to make the movie, and that's where the loan comes in. But if you have 100% equity, then you don't have to pay the lender to borrow. You can make the movie and then wait, and when the state validates that, you actually spent the money in their state, they'll give you the money back, and you get all of that money back.
Oh, fantastic.
But that can sometimes take up to a year, so,
correct.
Better to get the money up front from a debt loan or debt financing, and nothing personal, make you wait for the money.
Well, yeah, and that's a decision that financiers or the producers will make as they put the project together. And you do that in conjunction with your equity investors. I mean, some equity investors would prefer to get more money and are happy to wait for it. Some say, you know what, we'd be happy to pay 15% to a lender and let them deal with it and let them. It can be done either way, and both are good ways to get a movie made.
What I was going to ask in regards to the debt financing as well, it's like when you're looking at it from a tax credit point of view, it's like, are you looking at it from the full tax credit, or do you sometimes deal on half the tax credit?
Well, obviously, we'll look at the full amount
Yes.
that the tax credit, we expect the tax credit to be.
Correct.
If a production only wants to borrow half of that credit, well, then the way we look at it is that's a much safer loan, and therefore the price that we would charge for that would be lower.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. One other thing I'll add for filmmakers who it might be useful is that it's important to understand whether a tax credit is a rebate or a credit. And that's why I call them incentive, because some jurisdictions will give what's called a rebate. And what that means is when the government, the state or country or whatever it is, when they validate that the spend was actually spent the way it was supposed to be, they write you a check.
Okay.
They say, here's the money. So that's a rebate and you get the money back. Others will give you a credit. And a production company typically can't use the credit because, let's say you were shooting in Illinois, the production company doesn't have Illinois state tax liability, so they can't use the credit. So what almost always happens is the production company sells the credit to somebody else who can use the credit.
Yes.
But if you sell it, then you're selling it for less than the credit is worth. And that is usually sort of 90 to 95% of the value of the credit. So if you're in a jurisdiction that has a credit, the amount of money that comes back is going to be less the cost to sell the credit, where a rebate jurisdiction will be the actual amount of the money because they actually hand you the money.
Okay, so which does make sense, because it's like both ways, whether you rebate or whether you incentive, it's the money that you have now versus the money that is coming into the future.
Exactly. In both cases, the money will come later.
Mm-hmm.
But in one case, the government's handing you a check. In the other case, the government's handing you a credit that you have to sell to somebody.
So the money, go on.
Sorry. Well, the money that you will get back from a credit will be less than the amount that you get from a rebate.
Ah, okay, because that makes much more sense in regards to it. I was going to ask, so what is the difference when you're looking at it from an MG point of view, from a minimum guarantee point of view? And by the way, hello, Olaf.
Olaf, oh my goodness.
Yes, I snuck in on you. It's like I'm just cruising my way back home from work. So
excellent.
You get to see me. Hi there.
Hey.
Hi.
In the Olaf mobile.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like cruising down the road. So we're going to leave the video off. It might be a little disconcerting. No.
Yes. And that is my co-host. It's like roasting in Indiana. And so, Jonathan,
no, it's like actually in Kentucky at the moment. So headed back to Indiana.
There you go.
In Kentucky, headed back to Indiana.
There you go. He gets to roast in two coasts, two sides of the border. And so, Jonathan, I was wondering with regards to an MG, because it is a little bit more difficult to deal with an MG, because then you're actually pre-selling territory, or are you actually going against a minimum guarantee of a potential pre-sale of territory?
Well, for anyone who isn't familiar with an MG, a minimum guarantee, I'll just sort of take a step back. And from a lender's perspective, there are two types of collateral for a film. There's tax incentives that we just talked about. And then there are distribution contracts. And MG is one of those kinds of contracts. So in my opinion, the best way and a very important step that is often overlooked by independent filmmakers when making a film is before making the film, it's important to develop a relationship with a sales agent because once the film is made, it has to be sold. And there are 40 or 50 territories around the world, depending on how one counts them.
Mm-hmm.
So Japan, Germany, France, the UK, and so on.
Yes.
New Zealand, Australia. There are about 40 territories around the world. Each of those territories has distribution companies, and those distribution companies will buy the films, and then they will turn around and make them available to the ultimate audience. So before you shoot a movie, you can through a sales agent approach those distributors and ask them to buy the right to distribute your movie before, in many cases, before you start shooting the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very important thing to be able to do, because it gives a financier and it gives investors a sense of what the value of the film will be, even if it isn't a breakout hit. And it's possible to make sure that you are to feel comfortable that you're going to get all your money back before you shoot a frame of film.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's the most sensible way to make a movie. So in terms of the distribution contracts and the MG, what some distributors will do is they'll give you a minimum guarantee. So you go to them and say, here is the movie that I am going to make. Will you buy it today? And they'll say, okay, I will buy that movie today for $50,000, or I will buy it for $100,000, or whatever the price is.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they sign a contract that says, when you deliver the film to me, I will write you a check for $50,000, $100,000,
Okay.
whatever the contract is. That then becomes collateral for a lender, because a lender can look at that contract and say, oh, well, look, here's a contract. As soon as the movie is made, this distributor is going to write a check for $100,000. I can lend against that contract for $100,000.
Okay.
And the amount that one would lend against that contract is, again, a function of how much risk. If it's a contract from some distributor you've never heard of in Vietnam, you probably are going to lend a little bit less than if it's a contract from, say, Lionsgate.
Yeah. Or a participant or something like that.
Exactly. From a well-established,
Yeah.
reputable distributor that you probably have done business with many times in the past. So I've seen people lend 95 or 100% of the value of the minimum guarantees, depending on the circumstances, but quite a lot. A minimum guarantee from a large, well-established distributor is something that one would lend quite a lot against, whereas a distribution contract from a smaller, less reputable distributor, you'd want a lot more cushion. And then from there, when you get a minimum guarantee before you start shooting, those are called pre-sales.
Mm-hmm.
And then there will be territories that you haven't sold, and those are the unsold territories. But the value of the sold territories gives you a pretty good indication of what the value of the unsold territories are likely to be. So with a combination of pre-sold territories and unsold territories, it's possible, and we do consider lending against the value of the unsold territories as well. Obviously, there's more risk to unsold territories, so you lend less against unsold territories. But the combination of sold and unsold is another pile of collateral that we can lend against.
Okay, which makes a lot of sense. But then in essence, then you are actually doing a pre-sale in regards to it. It's like rather than, leaving it open in your markets as well in case post the movie or during the movie that you get a negative pickup.
Yes, well, a negative pickup is similar to a minimum guarantee. It's, they referred to picking up the negative of the movie, which was the movie. It's where the term negative comes from, right? So, and that, I think what you're referring to is sort of a worldwide sale. I mean, how fantastic if a Universal or, Paramount comes along and says, yeah, we'd like to buy your movie and we'll take all the rights for the whole world.
Yes.
Well, they can't do that if you've already sold some of the rights. And so what a nice problem to have. I mean, often you can go back to the people that you pre-sold it to and renegotiate with them. But the negative pickup in the worldwide sale doesn't happen every time. So it's riskier. And
yeah.
the great debate that producers typically have is, look, if we sell the territory in advance, we're going to get less. Because if we go and we make a great movie that everybody wants, well, we'll be really sad that we sold that territory for such a small amount of money, because we could have gotten so much more once they saw our terrific movie. But as a lender, I look at it and say, well, okay, you don't want to sell any of your territories, but that creates a tremendous amount of risk.
Yeah.
That at the other end, people don't want to buy the movie. So that means as a lender, I would lend less because the risk is higher.
Yeah.
And my recommendation to an independent filmmaker is to sell some territories in advance, because it establishes that there is real value for the project. And once some territories start to sell, other territories get interested, and it makes the ultimate sale of the movie more certain and easier.
So is it also dealing with also windowing? Because in terms of that, it's like, okay, so you sell out some of your territories. It's also selling out tertiary markets versus selling out like primary market. Does that also go against the lending process?
Well, the windowing is a different issue.
Yeah.
The pretty standard thing is to, as you sell the territories, you make it part of the deal that they can't release until you've released. Like, everybody's got to release it once.
Yeah.
So you won't have New Zealand releasing 2 weeks in advance of, or 2 months in advance of what you release in the UK or the United States. Traditionally, it's sort of pegged off of the US release date. So the traditional thing is you release in the US and then everybody else can release. But that's changing these days. I think we all know that there are films that are releasing in China first. There's films that are releasing in Europe first. It's great to see the global market growing, and that our industry is now really serving a global market.
It is.
But in terms of lending, the windowing, whether you release first on theater and then in DVD, but now it's sort of streaming video on demand, and then TV and so on and so forth. Those windows are fairly standard, and really, normally it doesn't impact the lending process because it's standard and everyone knows what the drill is. So that just is part of the deal that everybody knows. If someone wanted to make a significant change to that, obviously that would impact how we would look at it. But typically the release pattern is set and standard. So we're really looking at the value that the distributors are willing, the amount of money the distributors are willing to pay for the right to distribute the film.
Now, is that window growing smaller? And if so, how does that affect what you do?
Well, again, sort of two questions. Yeah, the window is shrinking, and it's really interesting to see how our industry is evolving. And it's geographically and through the shrinking windows. There's always a debate about whether to go theatrical for an independent film. Sometimes it can be it can push the investors further back because you decide to spend the money to market a theatrical film. If you're going to the theaters, you have to spend money on marketing, or no one knows the film is there and no one goes to see it, right? So then you have to spend the money to make the film and the money to market the film. And to market it theatrically, you got to spend significant amounts of money. I mean, if you're going up against, Marvel, they're spending a lot of money to make sure that. Okay.
Yes.
But a lot of money gets spent marketing films. So if you decide to spend as an independent film, you decide to spend that marketing money, it's sort of another bet. You're betting that the film will perform in the theaters. If it doesn't, that's even more money that you have to recover from the other windows that come after that. It's a decision that has to be carefully thought through for independent films.
Right.
In terms of lending, no, it generally doesn't impact us because we're really looking at the upfront payment that the distributors are willing to make for the right to distribute. We like everyone else, want it to be a hit because we want it to be a hit because then it makes a lot of money and everybody makes more. But as lenders, our goal is to be repaid in full by the advances that the distributors give.
Right.
And then we hope to have participated in a really fantastic film, but our financial position isn't impacted.
Okay.
Which does make a lot of sense because it's like then that way you are lending strictly on the strength of the actual. Now, in regards to that, it's like when you see it's like when you are seeing it, do you like to see the sales projections also because noting those as well as part of that?
Well, the sales projections are going back to there are two.
Yes, for the future sales.
Collateral. Yeah, so the two types of collateral. There's the tax incentives and the distribution contract.
Mm-hmm.
And so you typically, and I recommend people do, is they go to a sales agent and have the sales agent on board ready to sell the film. The sales agent will provide the sales estimates that show what they believe the value of each territory is. That is the amount that the distributors will be willing to pay for the right to distribute in each of those. So sales estimates are very important because that's the estimated value of the distribution contracts worldwide for the film.
Okay, and also it's like we were also talking a little bit as well about bridging. You know, dealing with the bridge loans versus these debt finance type loan against these. Can you talk a little bit about these bridge loans and how do they work?
Sure. So a bridge loan is it's a loan for a short period of time to bridge you from one point in time to another. So the typical bridge loan comes in when a typical example will be that the producers have gone out and they have made a certain number of pre-sales, and then they have the unsold territories, and they've gone to a bank. The bank is in the process of making the loan to the production. And large banks generally move slowly. They have monthly credit committees that they have to go through. So meanwhile, you have actor schedules, you're pulling the production together,
Mm-hmm.
the start date, because if you move the start date, you lose that actor, and if you lose that actor, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
So what you'll do is go to a bridge lender like us and say, and bridge loans are one of the types of loans that we make, and say, look, I need I need a loan for 3 weeks because X bank, here's our commitment letter from X bank, and we know that they're going to lend us $1 million, but they haven't gotten through credit committee yet, and we expect them to close in 3 weeks. But we need to prep the movie now because we're actually starting in 2 weeks, or we're starting in 4 weeks, but we can't prep a movie in 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
So then we would lend whatever the bridge amount is, say, $500,000, so that the pre-production can commence. And then when the bank makes their loan, part of the proceeds of the bank loan pays out the bridge loan. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's the bridge loan. The big question that you always worry about with a bridge loan, that I tell people, is you don't want the bridge to become a pier.
Exactly.
You want to make sure that you're bridging to a landing point at the other side, your big worry is that the senior lender doesn't make the loan, and then all of a sudden there you are. And
Yes.
you better be prepared to continue to make the movie. And so bridge loans can be expensive, but the reason that they're expensive is that you have to be prepared to take on the risk of financing the senior loan. And the senior loan is going through a process of due diligence. And so almost by definition, you're making a loan without having done all of the due diligence that a senior lender has done. So you're taking on a considerable amount of risk, and that's why these loans can be expensive.
Well, and yet it's only a stopgap measure, because it's like what you're trying to do is you're just trying to take those couple of weeks until the actual lender comes in, and like until the actual whatever it is, if it's an equity or if it's a debt, to be able to cover that.
Exactly.
But at the same time, you're having to take the risk that, the lender may decide, the board may decide, no, this looks a little too risky for us. No, we're not going to approve the loan. And then now you're out. The bridge, has collapsed.
The bridge has a tough decision to make. Either you walk away from your bridge loan, or you put more money in to step into the shoes of the piece of capital that didn't supposed to show up.
Mm-hmm. Well, which does make a lot of sense, because it's like they are there for a really good reason, and it's also very important for understanding for our listeners and our filmmakers that, look, you want a bridge loan when it is absolutely necessary, because this has already been locked into place. The money is coming. Don't think a bridge loan is like, okay, great, and another piece of equity or debt.
Yeah.
Yes. We would appreciate that.
Yes. No. It's meant to be a very, very short-term method. So it's like, okay, I need to pay the supplier now. In 1 week's time, my money's coming in. Can you please provide the money now for that?
Right. And it's expensive. So if you can avoid it, so much the better.
Yes. Do you also do any other kinds of bridges or gaps?
Well, I'm not sure there are other bridges or gaps. The other type of loan that we do is a finishing funds loan.
Yes.
Which is at the other end, where if a film runs into problems and uses up the money that they have, and now they're in a really tough spot, and the investors that are in place are staring at a very difficult situation, because obviously if a movie doesn't get completed, it's worth nothing.
Yes.
A pile of unedited footage it's not worth anything. So
as one of our previous guests pointed out, you do not want to go back to the investor and say, hey, we need a little more money, because they're going to say, what did they do wrong?
Yes.
And you've lost an investor for your next film.
They usually actually put a few adjectives around that phrase too.
Yeah, imagine.
Yeah. It's like, the how can you be so stupid?
Yeah. They are not happy conversations when those things happen, and the investor is faced with some pretty tough choices. One is to walk away, and that's the end of it. The second is to reach into their pocket and put more money in, and that's difficult. And the third is
increasing their risk.
Well, it sure is, and often they've lost confidence in the people who told them they were going to make a movie for X, and then they came back and said, well, when we said we were going to make a movie, what we really meant was we're going to make half a movie.
It's like whoopsie.
Right.
Well, they always say a half a movie is better than no movie. At least you get something going.
Well, I hear from a creative standpoint. I hear your point. From a financier standpoint, no.
Yeah. No.
Also, that would be a no on half a movie. Okay, good to
Well,
know.
I would
Good to
say
know.
half a movie is worth the same as no movie from a strictly financier's perspective.
Yeah.
Yes.
And again, there's a different conversation between that we can have as creatives versus financiers. But wearing my financier hat, a half a movie isn't worth anything. So in that situation, what will often happen is the production will come to us and ask us to provide the capital to finish the movie,
Yes.
and then we'll get involved. Our loan will be last in, first out, and it's expensive, but the good news is that the movie then will get completed.
True.
And you didn't have to tell the investors and get yelled at.
We actually prefer if everybody knows, because it's not. It's yeah.
Well, it's the honest way to do business. Yeah.
Surprised investors are not usually
Yes.
not happy investors, but then we go find good post-production houses like Periscope who will make sure that the film gets completed on time and on budget. And
Right.
I like to think that we're providing some important value in making sure that the movie gets completed, because then the investors at least have the fighting chance of getting their investment back.
Very true. And it's like it is direly so then at that point in time with the finishing funds, it is also a little bit difficult to then gauge how much in terms of risk. Do you then go to their guarantors and turn around and say, okay, well, now I've become one of the investors, so to speak?
Well, remember, our capital in a finishing fund situation will be the last money in and the first money out.
Yeah.
So that's just part of the way those types of loans work. The problem was created before we got involved in the project. So our attitude is we will help solve the problem that exists.
Yes.
But the way that we will do that is we will provide the capital, but we get our money back before anybody else gets their money back, because, well, without us, nobody's getting any money back anyway. So
true. Very, very true. It's like,
but then we're also providing our experience and expertise in ensuring that this time the movie actually does get completed and gets brought to the market and put in front of audiences, which is what we all want as filmmakers. That's what we want. We want the film to get finished and put in front of audiences.
do you often or have you been approached by guarantors who it's like, okay, we had to shut down production, it's like, this is what we got, we had our team come in who did this, will you do the finish for us in the post-production?
Well, obviously our post-production house,
Yes,
we have a lot of clients, and they come from all over the world, and we like to think that we're one of the best in helping our clients create fantastic content.
Oh, yeah.
And so once the client shows up, and we get their deposit, we roll up our sleeves and get to work making great content. Our post-production house doesn't worry so much about the financing side of the world. So the financing company, if there's a guarantor, then they've guaranteed a loan, or they've guaranteed whatever it is they've guaranteed. Obviously we'll talk to them and we'll work out how best we can provide the capital that's necessary to finish the film.
Yep. Which is wonderful.
It's very satisfying when we can be part of solving a problem. In situations like that, there's usually a lot of tension and a lot of people who are upset, and what's very satisfying is to get to the other end of that process where there's a completed film that filmmakers and all the participants are happy with, and we've been able to turn a really tough situation into something that's great for everyone.
Absolutely. It's like so. Can you tell us about some of your positive experiences, some of your negative experiences with this, with regards to some of the companies, or so, I should say, some of the challenges?
Well, I guess there, as you can imagine, there are a lot of strong personalities, particularly when you're dealing with creatives.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the challenges that we've encountered is that as the post-production or as the finishing process is going on, there can be, I'll just say, creative differences.
Hmm.
And visual effects is one area that often, not often, I won't say often, but it's an area that there can be a lot of a, a lot of differing opinions. I mean, just not to put too fine one on it, the
Hmm.
visual effects company comes back with visual effects that the filmmakers aren't happy with,
Yes.
and the filmmakers want to redo them, but that's not in the budget. And so either you have to go with the visual effects that you have, or you have to come up with more capital to pay for more um, more visual effects.
True.
So um, yeah, and I find it's important to just set expectations up front and to make sure that
Hmm.
everyone's clear that this is the path from here to completion. And as financiers, we're prepared to put up a certain amount of capital for completion of the film, and according to schedule and according to this um, schedule and this process that's going to happen. And they have creative control within that process.
Hmm.
But if it moves outside, then we have the ultimate to say when it's good enough and
Yeah.
it's time to complete the film. And that's where you
Well,
can run into, um, conversations that can be tough sometimes.
yeah, personality conflicts, we like to call. Yeah, the meeting of interesting people. As like, and in terms of positive experiences, have you a lot of stories of good positive experiences as well?
Oh yeah, frankly, most of the experiences are positive.
Hmm.
Um, and again, I think it comes down to setting the conversations you have up front are very important, because if the expectations are set up front, and if you know you have 4 days for color correction,
Yes.
and you tell everyone's clear 4 days of color correction, so make your prioritize, focus on what's important, get the most out of those 4 days, and then you check in after 2 days and say, is everyone, are we on track here? Usually at the end of 4 days, everybody's happy.
Hmm.
But if you don't have those conversations up front, and people think after 4 days, well, I really want to go back and do it again, then people are very disappointed. But I mean, I'm very proud of our post-production house. Our post-production team is fantastic. I mean, we do all the music for Empire, and if Fox trusts us with their biggest hit in a decade, it's
True.
like we can't be all that bad. But we have a lot of, where I really like to see are repeat customers, repeat clients, and filmmakers coming back to us and saying, we had such a great experience with you the last time, we'd really like to work with you again. That's where we're winning. We're doing what we want to do, and what we're passionate about is making great content.
Very true, and hope that we continue to also always make great content, because it's like, I mean, there's a lot that goes on in there. Also, it's like what's in the space, as well as also like you guys at Periscope, and oh my gosh, it's like in Periscope. When we were having a little bit of a conversation, also has like also music facility to be able to have that its own studio space for that to be able to use for post, as well as also state of
Yes,
the art. It was like, oh my god, state of the art.
yeah, CineSpace has been such a huge part of reestablishing Chicago as a major center for production. It's the people are great, the facilities are fantastic. We're really pleased to be part of the CineSpace family, and to, hopefully we're building a reputation of CineSpace in Chicago as being a place that, yes, you can come to Chicago and make great film, great TV, great online. You can do it all here, and we've got nice people, so.
Oh, absolutely.
Nice place to do it, too.
I agree. I concur. And also, so Jonathan, what is your best advice that you can give to a filmmaker in regards to regards to A, post-production, and B, for finance, that you could give them?
Well, I'll take it in reverse. For finance, one piece of advice I would give is think about your revenue. Talk to a sales agent. So many times I get pitches and packages that talk all about the story and all about the characters and all about the movie. And then they say, and our movie is going to perform like My Big Fat Greek, Open Water, Blair Witch, Holy Dynamite, Saw, Get Out. You pick these incredibly successful independent films. And we all know that not every independent film, most independent films don't have that type of outlier performance. And so it's, when you read something like that, it says to me that the filmmakers have not really thought about the economics of the project. They're not really thinking about the financiers and the financial investment. They're thinking a lot about the film, which is critical, obviously. And we're not making widgets. We're telling stories, and each one is individual and unique. And that's where the passion should be. But make sure you also address the financiers when you go to ask for investment, and be realistic about what the probable revenue is going to be. And the way to do that is to engage with a sales agent early and really be realistic about what's likely to be the outcome here. Then go make a fantastic film and beat all the expectations.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like with the sales agent, a good sales agent will be able to give you accurate ones. Is there in terms of sales agents those who it's like they're accepted projections, not accepted projections?
Yeah, there's some sales agents who have what are called bankable projections. They're large, they're well established, and their reputation is such that the banks will trust them. And there are others that are a little smaller and still developing their reputation and their track record. And we've got good relationships with a lot of sales agents, so we like to, sometimes they're great. They just haven't had the time to develop their reputations. So again, we look at all of that when we're deciding how much we can lend and what the pricing is going to be. And from the post-production side, my advice would be think about post-production before you start shooting the movie.
Yes.
And we, from the post side, we encourage, beg our clients to please have a pre-post meeting. As part of pre-production, have a pre-post meeting. Whoever your post-production is, include them in upfront as part of pre-production, because the workflow that comes out of production is so important to whether you have a smooth process in post-production. And it just comes down to, generally your post-production budget basically buys you a certain amount of time, right? You've got so many hours of color correction that you can do, so many weeks of editorial that you can do. Well, if you're burning up that time untangling the naming conventions of the files that you shot, if you didn't use, we sometimes have audio files that we have to manually sync to the video files because they didn't use the clapboard. And so, yeah, we can do it. It just means we're using up the time to do that instead of being, really digging into the creative process and being creative. So my biggest piece of advice on the post-production side is engage the post-production team in pre-production. Don't wait until after production and then hand them a pile of spaghetti and say, can you fix it in post? The answer is, yeah, we can fix it in post, but it's going to cost you either it's going to cost you in terms of time or money.
And sometimes both.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But take more time. Yeah, you can get the same amount of creative time on the creative side, but that's going to cost you more money.
Yep.
Get it right up front, and then we can really use the post-production budget as effectively as possible.
Well, is it better also then to receive it as pre-assembled footage? Because it's like sometimes what you can do during production, because you have to do your daily rushes anyhow on set to be able to see your rushes, it's like have it a little bit pre-assembled and pre-labeled for you guys. So then that way when it's coming to your post facility, you have it pre-labeled, it's like, and pre-synced.
That is all the conversation. Those are the types of conversations that should be happening in pre-production. And I certainly encourage, if the production can afford it, to have an editor or an assist assembling as you go. Because if you can have a rough assembly, you can make sure you got the coverage before you strike and move to the next location. There are a lot of benefits to having a rough. In terms of the post-production workflow, it's part of it, but it's not. Cutting during production is more about ensuring that you got the coverage, and not as much about the post-production workflow. We can do it either way.
Because it makes sense in terms of that, because it's like then also having some pre-synced footage helps in terms of that for the production side. It also helps somewhat in the post-production side, but you're still going to have to pull it apart.
Well, the syncing issue is,
yeah,
whether you do that while you're in production or post, it has to happen. That's where you just want to make sure that your post guys and your production guys are in sync, if I may coin the phrase.
Yes.
Because one of the issues you can get is files that don't resync, and then you're using hours and hours and days to resync footage. But again, you can do that before or after.
Yeah.
You just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page so that it syncs automatically.
So are you still, in terms of your post facilities, it's like you have linear and non-linears, right?
Sure.
Just in case for...
Yeah, we have a lot of clients who do it a lot of different ways, and we like working with them all, and we'll do it the way the client prefers, whatever they're comfortable with.
Okay, because it's like I know that there is still a few people who still do use film, and they do like it that way.
And then it's more costly, but
yes,
if that's the way they like to do it, obviously you've got to process the film and scan it, and because what I haven't seen is people actually physically cutting film anymore. Typically, it's the film is scanned and then edited.
Yeah.
Digitally, the way it's typically done.
Yeah, it still is all about the hard drives and stuff. It's like on the side of delivering it also to the distributor, it's like from your point of view, it's like once it's done in post, it's like you guys are able to do the delivery system, right?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, that's part of post, yeah. And Periscope is a full service post-production house. We do everything from dailies to delivery, and delivery is a process. It's a little more complicated than most people recognize, but it's something we do all the time, and it's just a matter of getting the delivery specifications that the particular distributor wants, and then we format the way they want it and deliver it to them.
Sounds great. Yeah. Also, how do they get you in social media, by the way, if they want to discuss both the finance as well as also the post-production?
We are on social media, yes. We've Facebook, and actually I don't think Argonaut has, actually I know Argonaut has not yet set up Facebook and engaged in social media. We find that when we have capital for film, people find their way to us.
Yes.
But Periscope, for sure, is actively engaged in social media. We're out there, and we love getting our name out and showing people what we can do, and then hopefully finding new projects that we can work on. That's what we love to do. We love making great content, and the more we can work on, the better.
Absolutely, and it's like we can't wait to be there.
We're excited to have you here.
Yes, it's like we're really excited about that. It's like working together on this. It's like we were sitting there going like yes during the. And is there a way that you'd like people to get in touch with you via social media?
Well, for Periscope, get in touch with us. However, our website is periscopepa.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. And for Argonaut, it's probably better to email info@argonaut.com, argonautentertainmentpartners.com.
Perfect. And Arpo, how do we get you in social media?
Well, if you want to be social, you can reach me on Facebook. If you want to do a little business, you can reach me on LinkedIn. And if you just want to chat, hey, I love to chat. So look me up on Skype, but just make sure you tell me you're a fan of Movietime, because I get way too many marriage invitations from Armenian women and too many robots wanting my credit card number.
and Nigerian princes wanting to transfer you money.
Actually, I got one from a 16-year-old girl orphan who wanted me to be her trustee, but for some reason her middle name was Stephen, so I suspect she wasn't being totally upfront with me.
You might be right about that.
I don't know. It's like many countries. It's like they name their girl Stephen as a middle name, possibly. And Olaf, how do they get you in social media?
Well, you can stalk me on both Facebook and Twitter at Olaf Barbosa, and if you happen to be going down I-65, you could probably get behind me, but
But lest we remind you, don't stalk too close.
That's right. He's packing.
Yep.
And he's got an itchy trigger finger.
Yes, I do get nervous, and I do have an itchy trigger finger.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Hey, watch out for that oil tanker.
Exactly. No kidding. It's like it's just not ready. There you go. And for me, it's like you can get me on LinkedIn, Bizipedia, Facebook, Twitter at Sonata Grayson, at Movietime Indie, as well as also, as I say, that with 4 pages of footprint. If really you can't find us, you're just not stalking us hard enough. So it is absolutely true. And Jonathan, it was amazing, amazing, amazing. And please tell me you're going to come back to us again.
Oh, absolutely. It was a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, and thank you for being here, and look forward to also our Friday show coming up this week. Take care, all, and have a great weekend, and have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone. See you Friday.
Thanks for listening.